So today we are going to discuss about the conspiracies. Here we have Derek. I think this is how it's been pronounced. Basically, maybe my accent could be a little
No, that's
different or the.
correct. Darek DeWitt.
Oh yeah, yeah. So here, what we are trying to do, what he is basically does is like he goes through a lot of conspiracies around a lot of things which are related to internet and a lot of things related to JFK assassinations and things like that. A lot of things, and he kind of demystifies this kind of conspiracies around this particular incidents. So, how do you do that? Why you are doing that? And what do you mean by a conspiracy?
Yeah, exactly. Well, to answer the questions in the order that occurs to me, the reason I'm doing what I mean by conspiracy theories is things that you'll find, especially on social media, but out there. You know, people talk about them. My philosophy is, Americans just had Thanksgiving recently.
Mhm.
Christmas is coming up, the holidays. A lot of people are going to be encountering family members who they might not normally see, and so I always imagine a sort of archetypal Uncle Tony, and Uncle Tony talks about the stuff that's in his head: chemtrails, JFK, Princess Diana, whatever. And some years ago, it was just kind of like, oh, well, Uncle Tony, he's kooky.
Mhm.
But, around 20, well, honestly, for most of the 2010s, but especially around 2016 in the presidential election in the US, we saw this stuff get sort of supersized and really started being used as a tool to change human opinions and behavior on a massive scale.
Mhm.
And I thought, boy, this is problematic. And then I already had another podcast that I do about business communications, so I was comfortable doing podcasts. And then COVID hit and lockdown happened, and I was surprised by how many people were already buying into these preposterous ideas that there are microchips inside of the vaccine needles, which, have you ever seen those needles? They're pretty small.
Mhm.
And, things like that. But people really, or at least claiming to be believers in these ideas. And I thought, I think maybe there must be some podcasts or something out there that look at these things critically and trace them. Where do these things come from? Why do people think this? Who's promoting it? And I didn't really find a lot out there. There are a couple notable ones. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a particularly good podcast where they kind of look at these things with a critical eye. But most of the stuff in the conspiracy space is pro conspiracy, or at least claim, or seems to be. Joe Rogan being the classic example.
Mhm.
The man never heard a conspiracy theory he didn't entertain. And I think this is irresponsible. It used to be 10, 15 years ago. Oh,
Mhm.
well, it was just kind of cute. But now I find it irresponsible and it angers me. And so I started doing this. And, that was in 2020. I'm still doing it because there's still a lot of stuff to talk about out there in the world.
Mhm. So the if you look into the American presidential candidates or the American presidents, there are most of them is got assassinated by one reason or another reason. For example, the Trump also got an assassination attempt recently before he is becoming the president, and there is a kind of fuss around this particular stuff, and especially if we look into the JFK's case, like a lot of conspiracies,
Mm,
like some Russian mafia or some sort of Fidel Castro's goons has did this particular thing. And what do you
hmm
think about that? Like you have expressed a lot of sound opinions on your shows related to this particular assassination, and what is that
mm.
very much evident, and what do you think about it?
Well, it's funny. The JFK assassination, I like to joke and say it's the gateway drug for conspiracy thinking. Right around, you have to keep in mind at the time, the 1950s had occurred, and we kind of have to go back to the 1920s. There was something called the First Red Scare, where American conservative politicians had a meltdown about communism, and started imagining all sorts of terrible things and saying all sorts of ridiculous things. And the John Birch Society was created, and all this. And then in the 1950s, you had McCarthyism, where people were actually being blackballed and blacklisted and lost their jobs and their ability to make money, especially in the arts, simply because they knew a guy who espoused semi-left wing or ideas that McCarthy thought, ooh, communist. And you think, wow, McCarthy must have been a real patriot, real anti-communist. But the truth of the matter is, I think he was just an opportunist. I think he was another scam artist in a long line of American scam artists who found a way to make money and gain power for himself by whipping up nonsensical narratives that had real world impact. Now, at the end of all this period, after McCarthyism ends, John F. Kennedy is running for president against Richard Nixon, who was Eisenhower's vice president. Kennedy, I mean, now we all go, oh, Kennedy, he was so great. Oh, we love him, Camelot. But a lot of people didn't like Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
He's very left wing. He's a Catholic in a country that is decidedly Protestant. And people were worried, oh, if he becomes president, what will happen? Will the Pope rule the country? And so on. So a lot of people didn't particularly like him. And then he won, and Nixon lost. And one of the reasons that happened is because it was the first televised presidential debate, and Nixon would not wear makeup because he thought that was fake. And so as a result, under the hot lights, Nixon just sweated like a criminal being grilled by the police. He looked terrible, and Kennedy looked great. So Kennedy won. Everything's going along. Immediately, of course, people who were didn't like him started spreading ideas. Oh, he's soft on communism. Whereas if you look at his record, he and especially his brother, not soft on communism at all. One of the closest times we ever came to nuclear war was the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was under his watch. Because he was like, no, Soviet Union, you're not putting nuclear missiles in Cuba. Bleh. Then he gets killed near the end of his term. And almost immediately, ideas started to float out there in the pre-internet world of like, that's weird, because we don't actually have a lot of assassinations in America. We had Lincoln, we had a couple others. There were a couple of assassination attempts, but it doesn't actually happen that much, surprisingly, for a country that likes guns as much as America does. So immediately people started questioning, who killed him? This guy? This clown? Who apparently one of the things he did after shooting the president was he wandered around and then he shot a policeman because he panicked, and then he went to the movies where he was caught. This seems very suspicious. And so people started to really run with this. And before you knew it, within a year, you started having books being published about how, ooh, no, some things don't match up, and the magic bullet and all. And so it was this real sort of cultural zeitgeist on the left of no way this guy Oswald killed him. And this was mainly a left-wing thing. And in fact, conspiracy thinking was primarily a left-wing hobby. It was not the conspiracy stuff on the right was always communism, 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 godless communists. They're coming to eat your babies. But on the left, they would come up with these complicated narratives, very often starting with Kennedy, because the idea is, okay, if I look at all the quote unquote evidence and I think, something is weird here. This doesn't add up. The Warren Commission report's not true. So that means if that's not true and that's the official report, that means they're covering it up. And they are the government. And if they're covering up the death of a president, what else are they covering up? And that's how the conspiracy ecosystem that we have today really kind of got started, essentially. And then
Yeah.
after that, of course, there's Jim Garrison. And Jim Garrison was the district attorney for New Orleans. And he really decided to hop on this. I'm going to solve the crime of the century, he said to himself and his people. And he was ruthless, and he really went after people's whole lives to try and destroy them. And that becomes the basis of the Oliver Stone book, the Oliver Stone movie, excuse me, JFK, which was very clever in the way that it mixes documentary type style of filmmaking along with the classic tropes and methodologies of um, normal fiction storytelling, and kind of blurs the lines between the two. And a lot of people were like, yeah, that's the real story. But not according to a guy I've had on my podcast 3 times, Fred Litwin, who this is all he does. He just researches JFK conspiracy theories, especially Jim Garrison, and he keeps writing. He's written 3 books now about how Garrison was full of crap. And he was a ruthless person, power hungry, maybe insane. And he nonetheless had, again, very real world implications. He destroyed people's lives with his ridiculous allegations that he had no factual basis for at all. And yet, that by then, there were so many people who were like, yeah, something is fishy here. Oliver Stone is obviously one of them. That, that's it. There are people out there today, plenty of people who would not consider themselves conspiracy people, who still go, well, except for JFK. Like that was totally, that was a hit job. And then who killed him, as you mentioned, could be whoever you hate, the government, the communists, Castro, the Jews, the CIA, the New World Order, aliens. There are literally people who say he was killed by a gas propelled gun of alien manufacture by his driver, who was in fact an alien disguised as a human being. So, it's kind of
Mhm,
the gift that keeps on giving.
mhm, mhm. So there is a conspiracy around the JFK assassination. Is like it's about aliens as well, right? Like but
Oh,
do you
yeah.
really think this Oswald is like that this little guy he got a
Yeah.
real motive behind killing somebody like a president? Do you really feel
You
like?
know, Well, when I first, when I was younger, I also thought, that seems weird. How did that bullet end up on the stretcher? The supposedly the scope on the rifle that he used was improperly mounted, and so how is that possible? It's also very, very hard to get off those 3 shots with that kind of a bolt action rifle in that short period of time at a moving target at a strange angle. And this guy wasn't particularly known to be a great sharpshooter and blah blah blah. And so I thought, yeah, probably something is hinky with JFK's assassination, until you actually look into it. When I was first approached by Fred Litwin for my 50th episode to come on my podcast, I was kind of a little bit of at least a semi believer. And then I started looking into that. I was like, well, let's talk about the proofs, the umbrella man and the shots people heard and all these things. And it turns out that if you actually go to the actual records, which are all online, you can just look them up. It's free. Yeah, actually, there is a very good case for Lee Harvey Oswald as the sole person. And I mean, we could talk about this for 19 hours and never get through all the details. But yeah, there is a very good case that Lee Harvey Oswald is the sole shooter, and he did it because he was a little weirdo. He wanted to be important. He wanted to be famous. He was trying to show off to some people he kind of sort of knew, but he was a loner. He was a loner. He was abusive to his wife, and had constantly been trying to find himself. And he thought, this is the way I'm going to do it, and it worked because we all know Lee Harvey Oswald. And every time now there's some kind of shooting or something like that, you'll notice we always use the person's middle name because of Lee Harvey Oswald. So that name has stuck in our heads, and now we don't say Derek DeWitt, we say Derek John Michael DeWitt did this, because we got to use the person's full name for some reason. And that all started with Oswald and Kennedy. So yeah, I think Oswald is the sole shooter, and he did it because he was a little nut. And it's just one of those crazy things that, wow, the president got killed. Heck, because who no one thought it would happen, especially there. Someone's going to shoot from the fifth floor of the book depository. It seems weird. So yeah, I personally, I am now convinced that it's just Oswald.
So, which episode of your show is basically giving a lot of evidence regarding this, where people can go and look into? Which episode
So
of
that's
this?
it's episode 50 was the first one called the JFK assassination Biggins. Then there was a follow-up episode 79 about Mr. Litwin's next book, Film Flam, which specifically looks at the JFK movie by Oliver Stone, which is about Jim Garrison. And we talk about more of the supposed proofs and discounting them. And then we just recently did episode 123 about his next book, A Heritage of Nonsense, because he collects these stories and he's great stories of people around Garrison, and he makes a very good case in there for yeah, Garrison was a power hungry, ruthless jerk and not a nice guy. He's not Kevin Costner, everybody's dad, like in the movie, who's just, I just want to find the truth. No, he is a ruthless, power hungry jerk who doesn't care whose lives he ruins. And he creates this atmosphere at the DA's office in New Orleans where he starts attracting all these lunatics. He has a guy come up to him who says, I'm a psychic and I have and a medium, and I have communicated with the ghost of Lee Harvey Oswald, who, by the way, was also my homosexual lover when he was alive. And you're just like, oh, who are these people who come out of the woodwork for this? Because there's a lot of fame attached to this, and I think these people are excited. They're like, wow, maybe I can become famous and maybe leverage that and turn that into speaking engagements or a book or some kind of profit. Or maybe for them the fame is enough. I don't know because I'm not crazy and I'm not power hungry. So I don't know why they do it.
Yeah, but I also have had a look into the birth chart of JFK basically. Maybe we can do it later. I know that you don't believe all these things, and you just say that all these stuffs are like yeah, there might be some reasons to peoples to believe it's other way around, or a straight way around, or whatever the way
Mm,
they feel like. They have a lot of reasons to that. Like maybe if
sure.
yeah, maybe we can do it later. I mean, it will itself will take a lot of time to analyze the chart. So, like, let's,
Yeah, it's a long thing,
yeah,
but
yeah.
the thing to keep in mind on Podbean, which is where my podcast is
Mm-hmm.
hosted, I always in the episode notes I have a series of links. So for people who want to like the magic bullet, it turns out yes, there is a reason for it. What about this guy? What about
Mm-hmm.
this proof, this proof, proof. So it's easy. People can just click and go, oh, I'm interested in this one. Click, and you can go to the actual online government archives and see what they say. And what they say actually makes sense. And then
Mm-hmm.
you go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay. I thought that was weird. It turns out it's not that weird.
Mm-hmm.
you know, I didn't know because guess what? I'm not a ballistics expert. So
Mm-hmm.
why would I know? I mean, we say this is the thing we do is we all think we're so smart and we think, well, common sense is not common. Common sense is also very often not sense. We think, we used to think the sun went around the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was common sense. And people who said, no, no, actually, I think it's, that's not how it is. I mean, they got themselves in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Galileo was arrested and put in house arrest for years as a result of his findings. So, uh, I understand why people might want to hang on to that,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no need to because the evidence is out there and it's all free on the internet. Just go look it up. And
Mm-hmm.
by look it up, I mean don't watch some JFK was killed by the alien Jew Illuminati
Mm-hmm.
video on YouTube. That's not proof. Go to the actual archives and the actual records and see what is actually true, and then make up your own mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we're let's I mean, Let's move to the uh, conspiracy around, the Princess Diana. Like, as you have already said, there are people who are believing the Earth is flat. That itself is a conspiracy. I have heard it an
Yeah,
episode in that people are just arguing with me that the Earth is flat, and they are giving lot of proof that doesn't make any sense according to the physics anyway. So what do you think about
right.
the Princess Diana's case? What happened, and what is that? Whether the state is involved in the behind the assassination, or is that is an assassination or just an accident? What do you think about it?
Well, of course. So the theory is that on August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana, former Princess Diana, because she's divorced at that point, and her boyfriend Dodi Al Fayed are in Paris. They're out partying. Maybe the driver had had a few drinks because possibly he had not known he was not supposed to be the driver that night. And so he thought, hey, it's my night off. He had a couple of drinks. And then they were like, let's get out of here because the press is just brutal. And they're really brutal to the royal family. Like they're just evil. And so they were driving too fast, and possibly the driver had had a couple of drinks and he was perhaps a little bit impaired, and they entered that tunnel along the Seine in Paris, went out of control, hit one of the supports, and died. And what a terrible, terrible thing. Almost immediately, though, people went, because she's famous. That's the thing. If this happens to you or me, people immediately would go, wow, that sucks. That's terrible. Wow. Really? But they crashed in that. Man, that's really terrible. But because she's famous and because she's beloved, that a lot of people went, the royal family didn't like her. And if you already don't like the royal family, you already have this idea in your head that, oh, they're nefarious and unscrupulous, and, they're evil and they will do anything that they want, and with no repercussions because they're so powerful. But really, the conspiracy theory was started by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed. And Mohammed Al Fayed, almost immediately, he went to the press and he said, I don't believe it. I think that my son and Princess Diana were murdered. And then the press loves this. I know people say, oh, the press is, left wing biased or right wing biased. The fact is, the press is conflict biased. They like conflict. They like stories that keep people coming back. And now it's, click, click, click. We want those clicks. So he's the one who really started it, and then the press just ran with it. And they went, oh, okay. And then here's the thing. If you've already decided this was an assassination instead of a terrible accident, then you will then look for proof for that. That is how people, it's not how the scientific community works, and it shouldn't be how law enforcement works. So sadly, sometimes it is. But, um, you know, uh, keyboard jockeys and internet sleuths out there, they are very often already start with a preconceived notion. Princess Diana was killed. Why? Well, she was killed because she was an embarrassment, except she'd been an embarrassment, and then that was over. The divorce happened. So why kill her after the fact as just revenge? That seems silly and weird. Uh, oh, well, what if, and this was Mohammed Al Fayed again, who floated that one out there, and the press ran with it. What if she was pregnant with Dodi's kid? And now, even though she's not part of the royal family technically anyway, she kind of is. And so they did not want a half Egyptian, half British child hanging around with possibly some kind of claim in the royal family. Oh, well, I mean, yeah, okay. Is the royal family racist? Yeah. Do they head a system that is structurally racist? Yes. But again, this argument doesn't make sense because she's not
Mhm.
in the line of succession. She's no longer married to Charles. So therefore, her kid is just her kid. There's no reason to do
Mhm,
it.
mhm, mhm.
So now the fact is, I haven't looked into this. I was just, since the year is switching over, I was doing some research on what are the most commonly believed conspiracy theories, and which ones of those have I not examined yet on my podcast. Princess Diana is one of them. So I probably am going to do an episode on it sometime in 2025. So I haven't looked into the details myself. But my gut says no, she wasn't assassinated. Number one, because who believe that the royal family is a bunch of reptiles from another planet who pretend to be human and eat children. But there are many people out there who do believe that. Like the royal family, I should do a whole episode just on the conspiracy theories around them. They are
Mm-hmm.
amazing. They're vampires, they're reptilian shape shifting aliens, they are Khazars, which is this nonsense, fake Jewish, anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. They're behind the Freemasons. They're behind this and that. To listen to the people who really hate the royal family and subscribe to those conspiracy theories, the royal family is Satan. That they are literally working for Satan to make Earth hell.
Have you did
And
any
so, if
episode? Can I pass you there? Like, have you did any episode on the Diana's conspiracy yet? No, that's what you said,
no,
right?
not yet, not yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on it, but
Uh-huh. So
maybe
we can
maybe
as
in the spring.
yeah, we can expect something which is in that particular account very soon, right? Like in
Right.
your yeah, okay. So and also like like if we look into that Obama's conspiracy, see what people are saying, like he is not American citizen at all, and he there are a lot of things around him. How do you see that, like because just because the black person is becoming the president
Yes.
of America or anything that sort, like is that what you think?
I think number one is that America is a deeply, deeply structurally racist country. It can't
Mm-hmm.
help itself. And by the time Obama runs for president, we've already seen conspiracy thinking has gone from being pretty much mainly, except for communism scares tactics, on the right, pretty much a left wing hobby until the 90s. And then the 90s, we see it start shifting to becoming primarily a right wing thing. And so by the time Obama runs for president in 2008, um, there's it's becoming much more of a right wing thing to just throw out conspiracy theories and have people go, oh yeah, and just believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Americans, especially, I think this is true in a lot of competitive things like sports. Um, it's not enough to just root for your team. The other team is also awful. They're terrible. You can ascribe anything you want to ascribe to them is true. And so by the time Obama is running for president, we've already got this structural racism. We've got right wing voters really kind of just believing anything they hear, provided it confirms their prejudices. And you've got this methodology of let's destroy our enemy any way we can. And so all this stuff comes out about Barack Obama. There were so many, in fact, that since he was the 44th president, for my seventh episode, I found 44 conspiracy theories about him. I call it 44 for 44. And there
Mm-hmm.
are 44. There were more, by the way. There were
Mm-hmm.
over 50, but I
Mm-hmm.
decided to keep it to 44.
Mm-hmm.
44 conspiracies about Barack Obama. The most reasonable one is that, oh, he's not really um, an American citizen. And so therefore, he can't possibly run for president because it's one of the requirements. And this was latched onto by Mr. Donald Trump, who thought,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I can get my brand to
Mm-hmm.
become a bit more high profile. So I'll just jump on board with this. And he was one of the big promoters of what was known as the birther movement. Show us the birth certificate, blah, 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 blah. And Obama was like, blow me. I don't need to show you the certificate. And then
Mhm.
finally they did. And of course, what a surprise. Everybody said that was fake.
Mhm.
So, show us the birth certificate. Here it is. No, that's fake. Well, I just can't win with you guys, can I? In the meantime, I'm president. Nah,
Mhm.
and I'm going to get on with the business of it. And so they come up, there were tons of things about Obama. He's a communist. He's a Muslim. Like, even if he was, so what? He can control the weather. Seriously, there were actual evangelical preachers who thought he could control the weather, that he utilized certain kinds of speaking techniques in order to hypnotize people. Of course, he's a shape shifting reptilian. On and on and on and on and on. It all went. And the conspiracy theories were astonishing. Every president of America has weird stuff out there, rumors about them. But Obama, it was quite spectacular to see the number of videos and blog posts and so
Mhm.
on. He's the Antichrist. He's this. He's that. He's secretly a Muslim. He's secretly Jewish. He's secretly both. He's a communist. He's a fascist. He's a communist and a fascist. Well, that's not possible because they hate each other. Like it didn't matter. It didn't matter what you said
Mhm.
because all you needed to do was signal, I hate this guy. And then other people would go, I hate him too. And you didn't have to agree on why you hate him. You just hate him.
Mhm. 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 So now, right now, the Trump is actually, I think in America there is a conspiracy trio, like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and the Donald Trump. Like the what do you think about that? Like they are behind all these conspiracies. Most, I mean.
Well, here's the thing. I
Mm-hmm,
mean, Donald Trump and the people around him in 2016, they started coming up with this concept of a post-truth society.
mm-hmm,
As one, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but one person literally said in an interview, people who live in the what I like to call the truth-based world think this, but we just say this. And I remember when I first read that, I went, the truth-based, what I like to call the truth-based world, isn't that the world? Is there another way to look at it? And apparently, the MAGA people say yes. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to believe your stuff. I'm
mm-hmm,
going to believe my stuff and say that's true, even though it isn't,
mm-hmm,
even though it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because let's face it, whether we landed on the moon or not doesn't really affect me. So therefore, I'm going to enter into a world and a social system because I think some of this is about companionship in and with the other people who say we didn't land on the moon. And so now we're all in this post truth world. We can all have our own kind of little streams. The Trump people now have gotten much better at utilizing this.
mm-hmm,
And we saw, I mean, Putin absolutely interfered in the 2016 election. And there was an interview with somebody from what I don't think it wasn't Fancy Bear, but it was one of their big hacker farms, troll farms, who they were just laughing. They just said, we cannot believe that for a couple of $1,000s in Facebook ads, we were able to sway the presidential election.
mm-hmm,
Like that's just value for money right there, Now,
mm-hmm,
why would Putin want to do that? Because he wants to destabilize Western systems because he's not good at playing that game. So he is good at playing his game. And
mm-hmm.
so he and I think a lot of these other quote unquote strong men.
Um, we've been talking about the post-truth society. What does it mean? Like,
hmm,
what is it?
I mean, it's a misnomer. It's garbage. It doesn't mean anything. There's no such thing as a post-truth society because what is not truth if not lies or fantasy?
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm,
by using even the term post-truth, you're basically saying fantasy, and yet there are plenty of people who seem to be very happy to live in that fantasy world, and I guess for them something like
Mm-hmm.
my podcast. I mean, I hope. It's one of the ideas behind the podcast is that it will maybe knock a couple people back into the light. But really, my podcast is for those that have to suffer those people, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Uncle Tony, there's no helping Uncle Tony. Uncle Tony is absolutely convinced that, Queen Elizabeth II had Diana killed. Nothing you can do to change his mind. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what you say, it doesn't matter what proof you have. He will always find a way to hang on to his belief. So, really, my podcast is just for people going like, what, why does Tony go on about this? Here's why. Here's where it comes from. Here's what the proof, quote unquote, is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to make counter arguments, you want to go down that path, here are the counter arguments you can make. It won't help, but
Mm-hmm.
you can try. And
Mm-hmm.
every once in a while, you might get somebody who goes, oh, well, yeah. Because here's a funny thing I've discovered in the last few years of doing this. Almost all conspiracy theory believers, they don't just believe in one. I
Mm-hmm.
would love to meet or encounter a conspiracy theorist who just has one thing: Kennedy was killed by the CIA. End of conversation. Everything else, I don't buy it. I don't believe in
Mm-hmm.
Bigfoot. I don't believe in the Bermuda Triangle. I don't believe in chemtrails, but I do think Kennedy was killed by the CIA. I would like to talk to that person, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the person exists because if you believe one, you tend to believe more. And the way that the social media algorithms work is that they kind of have them all grouped together. And so they will feed you that content. And like I said, it's a gateway drug. Once you
Mm-hmm.
think the government, people within the government, maybe rogue elements, but people within the government killed their own president. Once you're willing to accept that as a possibility, then, why not chemtrails? Why not Bigfoot? Why not,
Mm-hmm.
magnets cure cancer? Why not?
There,
Maybe, who
there, there,
knows? Because,
There is one thing which I would agree is that as a programmer, as a software engineer, what I believe is that the our thought is actually most of the people's thought is basically programmed by machines because machines is been designed in a such a way that it is kept on feeding the dopamine to the people. So
mm-hmm,
that is how the algorithms work. So basically it will push what you personally like rather than that what can be possibly true.
right.
So I what I believe is that the thought of the people mostly is designed by the machines itself. Mm.
To a certain extent, I mean, we're certainly
Mhm.
we're certainly getting a lot more information from machines heading our way. And a couple of episodes I've done in the past, and some I'm doing in the near future, are all about cognitive biases, how the brain works, how memory works. We think our memory works this way. It doesn't. It actually works this way. It's completely different than what you think. And so our brains don't even work the way that we think they do.
Mhm.
So it's no surprise. I don't think it's nefarious. I don't think there was a concerted effort to do this. It's just kind of one of those unhappy accidents that by chance, in order to make money,
Mhm.
because that's what we're all about is making money, the way that these companies make money also happens to tweak the way that people think and sort of exploit these blind spots and these cognitive biases that we have and help create a more polarized society, in which case my people are always right and the other people are always evil. And there's a psychological study years ago that showed that there's something called out-group homogeny and in-group differentiation, which is any group that I'm a part of, we are all unique individuals, but they are all the same. You live in India. This has been the conversation in India since partition, right? They are like this, but we are all unique individual people. And this is from the Hindu side. This is from the Muslim side. This is from people in Rajasthan. This is people in, against people in other parts of the country. I mean, India is this truly unique, interesting, very vibrant, very differentiated country. And yet, these conversations that go on in the culture there also I mean, they get ugly sometimes. People die
Mhm.
because of thoughts. It's just
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't like Donald Trump, but like somebody was planning to kill him. Come on, man. Kill? Really? Is that what we're doing? We're gonna kill, we're gonna kill somebody because their car broke down, but there's a rumor going
Yeah, the
around on the
can I
WhatsApp group that there's a witch in town, like, come on, man.
so I would love to go to the next one actually, like in our list, like it's about the
Mhm.
Paul McCartney's stuff. Like the peoples are believing that he is already dead before he is actually died. So what do you
Yeah.
think about that? Like they have a lot of reasons. Like he's not
Mhm.
wearing the chapels and he's doing that and this and the
Yeah.
flyers are looking in this particular way and John Lennon
Right.
was like that and this and so what do you think about it? Like, what exactly happened then?
Well, I mean, he's alive, so
Mm-hmm.
there's that. I mean, that's that's the end of conversation. Paul McCartney's alive, he's still here. Yeah, believe me, I get it for people who are like, the Beatles were so awesome and Paul McCartney's solo stuff is so not awesome. Surely it's a different person. We'd all like to think that, but no, it's just one of those things. I mean, the whole Paul is dead thing actually started in early in 1966. But and the notion was that he died in a car crash on November 9th that year and was immediately replaced with a lookalike because the Beatles were the biggest band in the world. But, and this is what I love, but the rest of the Beatles, of course, they knew this is a fake Paul because Paul died, but we're all going to go along with it. But then we're going to hide clues on our album cover art, like Paul is backwards on the back of Sgt. Pepper's. He's barefoot on the cover of Abbey Road. We're going to leave all these clues for the discerning public to figure out that actually Paul's fake. Now, my first question is, why on God's green earth would the record label allow them to do that? They wouldn't. There's no way. If the record label replaced Paul McCartney with a fake, we're just going to sneak in a bunch of clues. Oh, okay, go ahead, guys. There's no way they would allow this, right? And they really started taking off in 1969 on college campuses thanks to some music magazines. And it was 1969 on college campuses. A lot of people are, you know, having a lot of
A lot
ideas.
of a lot of hippies were there. I mean, in the
A
70s.
lot of hippies, yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, man, especially if you've already gone into like, well, they killed Kennedy. I mean, maybe, these greedy bastards, I would totally believe it. So, there's that. There are variations on this, however. The main one is Paul died in 1966 or maybe 1967, and was replaced by a look-alike and a sound-alike. Another theory goes they all died and they've all been replaced by duplicates, except Paul. Paul's the original. Another one goes, this is my favorite one. They have all died many times because, despite the fact that we're still having a hard time printing meat and we haven't cured cancer, even back in the 60s, we had the technology to reach into parallel universes. And so when Paul died, they reached into a parallel universe and pulled out another Paul McCartney and put him in our universe to be Paul McCartney and the Beatles. But then John died. So they did the same thing. And then Ringo died. And then George died.
Hmm.
But it's a problem because they're not from our universe. They keep aging quickly or dying or whatever. So they keep having the record label, who has this amazing technology. The record label keeps reaching into other dimensions and other universes and pulling duplicates. And they did this until it was no longer tenable, and then the Beatles broke up. That's the best one. Come on, that's funny. In fact, it's all so funny that it was my very first episode was
So
about Beatles.
what was the number of the episode in which you've been dealing with all
Number
these?
one, my
Number
very
one.
first
Oh,
one. Yeah, the
okay,
very
okay.
first episode is
Mm-hmm.
Beatles Conspiracies. It's called Glass Onion, and Glass Onion was a song that John Lennon wrote to
Mm-hmm.
be funny to play with people who believed various conspiracy theories about Paul being dead. He wrote the song Glass Onion and put in all this stuff. The walrus was Paul and all these other things in an effort to keep those people busy. So he actually leaned into it and decided to run with it. But
But
the Beatles themselves were always like, yeah, it's weird. People are crazy, I guess, that they believe this because fans are weird. Fan theories are
mhm,
weird.
mhm, mhm. I think the John Lennon was a very good entertainer with a lot of ability to think through that made. I mean, that is the one way of selling the albums and music and stuffs like that. Like, do you? I mean, what do you think about
No,
like?
I don't think I don't I
Mhm,
don't think I don't think it was a concerted effort on their part to sell more albums because their albums were selling. There's having an unspoken rumor flying around college radio stations and on college campuses with a bunch of people smoking pot. I don't think they're going to sell that many more albums that would make it worth to do all this. I think it's just that anytime, if you've seen any interviews or documentaries about all four of those people, they were not only very talented, but they were very funny. They were
mhm.
very, very funny people. And this is their sense of humor. And so they were like, hey, let's just do this for fun. Ha! And so they did because it amused them to do so. And they were the biggest band in the world, so they could.
I mean, the John Lennon's work is like, if we look into his album, I mean, it's a kind of mystical experience he was able to bring down to the world where people could experience the same thing. So, I mean,
Mm.
I mean, see, having a mystical experience is different, and the ability to share it with the other people via a kind of medium is making them also to experience the same is a kind of a great thinking way. I mean, only a great thinker can do that. Like, I
Mm.
mean, that's what I believe. I mean, I mean, do you have any, how do you reflect towards this? Like,
I mean, spiritualism. I'm not someone to. I don't believe in God, and I don't really believe. I can't say I believe in any of those things.
mm-hmm,
If nothing else, just because of the multiplicity of ideas out there, the notion that no, of the 7,000 different stories on where we came from and what happens after we die. This one is the right one. Probably not.
mm-hmm,
Whatever it is, we'll find out when we die because, that's what'll happen. So if there
mm-hmm,
is something, we'll find out. And if there isn't, then that'll be that. And it's really a matter of how you want to live your life today. And if living a quote unquote mystical life helps you become a better person, then yeah, I don't care.
mm-hmm,
Have a
absolutely.
great time.
Mm-hmm,
If of all the religions out there, I think Buddhism is the closest one to
mm-hmm,
my heart because it has a little bit of a scientific basis to it,
mm-hmm,
at
mm-hmm,
least in the methodology. And the
mm-hmm,
Dalai Lama himself, when asked once, "What if science proves
mm-hmm,
conclusively
mm-hmm,
that life after death isn't true and that reincarnation is not true?" And he said, then Buddhism would have to change. And I
mm-hmm,
respect that. I'm
mm-hmm,
like, there you go. Right. I
mm-hmm,
don't think your evangelical Christian televangelist trying to get money from sick and old people is going to have that attitude. He's going to say, well, then they would be wrong and working for the
mm-hmm,
devil and blah, 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 because he's got a good grift going and he doesn't want to, stop the gravy train. But
yeah.
when the spiritual leader of a whole religious movement says, well, if we're wrong, then we're wrong,
Yeah, because the
I
thing is like,
respect it.
what exactly is like, there is a conceptual difference between the God concept of the Abrahamian religions and the religions which are comes from the from here. I mean the India. Like so
Mm,
because we generally in most of the religions we really don't believe in the gods basically. Like it's not about God, it's about Brahman. Like you
mm,
can see there are multiple gods in India, but it is not exactly gods. It's like it's a deity. It's some sort of other being which you can actually
mm,
acquire that kind of thing, that kind of ability. It is good to have looking beautiful, and it is good to have a lot of money. It's good to have a lot of friends. There is nothing wrong in that, like, so these are the ideals, like, because it's not gods, like, somebody who is sitting in the hell or heaven and he is blessing you, or I mean, there is nothing like that is there in India. I mean,
Mm,
the evangelistic peoples, they are believing the god, and they are trying to propagate the agenda of the god. And yeah, but the thing is, like, this is out of the um I mean, the scope of our particular podcast. I feel like we should be,
mm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that religions, and especially Buddhism and Hinduism,
Mhm,
but all religions are potential tools for sort of especially like say the Hindu deities. They're almost like computer programs. You could
mhm,
look at them sort of as an analogy there. They are suites of thoughts, and there are practices that are processes that a human being can do. A human being who has a mind and also lives in a physical body. And you could do them. I've done Buddhist breath meditation.
mhm,
You can breathe in a very certain way and stimulate the mind in such a way that it creates a very similar experience to, say, taking a hallucinogenic drug,
mhm.
without
Yeah,
it
it's
takes
a.
a lot longer,
Mhm.
you know,
That's a kind
and it
of
doesn't.
it's a kind of psychedelic experience. I mean, I've been to the Rainbow Gathering, which is basically a hippie festival, which has happened in the India. So the thing is, like, I mean, in if you look into the Vedic knowledge, also there is a lot of, I mean, a lot of psychedelics is being actually used to, in order to experience this certain level of consciousness. For example, the soma,
Right,
the soma is one of the drink which has been talking in the Vedas, that is actually, it helps people to experience the immortality. Like, how does it feel like immortal? Because it's very
right.
close to truth, like, so yeah. Anyway, like, what do you think about the 9/11 conspiracies?
I think that they're borderline racist. I think they're weird. It depends on which one. Like Kennedy, 9/11 is, there's a whole suite of them out there. Pick your enemy.
Mm-hmm,
And that's those are the ones who did it, because honestly America's just surprised. They were surprised. What a surprise that America could be attacked by commercial jet aircraft. Who knew that that was even a possibility? I have to say it, I saw it happen on TV. I was in San Francisco, and I mean, it's not the nicest first thought to have, but my first thought was, wow, that was clever. Like, what an attack. Holy Jesus. And no, I don't think anybody expected those buildings to go down, but they did. And that's that. So again, there's a thing in science that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Again, this idea that America, so first off, the Americans did it. The government did it themselves. Why? There was a bunch of gold in one of the buildings that collapsed in building 7. See, the two towers were knocked down as smokescreen, literally, so that they could steal all of this gold from this building. Except that it was their gold to begin with, so that doesn't make any sense. No, no, no. There was a bunch of information in there that they wanted their hands on. Okay, and so they killed all these people and caused all of this havoc. And again, remember, we're talking about capitalists here. Capitalists, one thing we know about capitalists, besides that they like to get money, is that they hate to spend money. So the astonishing amount of cleanup to get, what's the benefit again? But again, if you've gone already, they killed presidents. They killed Diana. Uh, Paul McCartney died quite by chance, and yet they covered that up. There's nothing these evil bastards won't do. So, of course, they kill 4,000 people in these buildings because they're evil. And it didn't matter. It doesn't matter that what they got out of it was tiny. They don't care because they're ruthless and evil. And you're like, oh, okay, then how come they don't do it all the time? Why don't they do it all the time? And then you get into the false flags and all this stuff. Well, they do it all the time. It's constant. So you get this weird notion in some people's minds in this post-truth mentality that there's a war going on, and a war that has been going on for decades, maybe centuries, a secret war against us, whoever we are, by them, whoever they are. And sadly, more often than not, the they is Jewish people. For Westerners, it's almost always Jewish people at its
Mm-hmm.
heart. Many of these arch conspiracies trace literally the things that they say back to old anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So, it's really just the same. It's just the same story again and again and again and again with different set dressing. Just like, you have Netflix. I'm sure you've noticed it's the same plots again and again and again. My wife
Mm-hmm.
and I are always joking, oh, it's another Dead Girl in the Woods show because it starts off with a dead girl in the woods and then it goes from there. But it's basically, we call police shows procedurals because they have a format that they follow. The conspiracy theory world is exactly the same. This is a format. Here we go. There we are. And now we just put in the particulars.
Mm-hmm.
It's Kennedy who was killed. It was Diana who was killed. It was Avril Lavigne who was killed or died. That's another one of those. Paul McCartney died, was replaced. So when Avril Lavigne died in 2002 or 2003, she was replaced. Kanye West died in 2016 and he was replaced. So you get all these crazy fan theories out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's always you replaced the person. So you found, like, tell me how that worked. You found someone who looked like them? The new version is, no, they're clones. To which my first question is, oh, have we perfected human cloning? Because we cloned.
Have you did any episode on the 9/11 the problem, like, the
No, I have. It's such a big one. I actually had an episode that fell on nine
Mm-hmm.
eleven
Mm-hmm.
in 2024, and I had intended to do an episode about 9/11 on 9/11, but we were in the lead up to the election, and I had a lot of things I wanted to say about what is fascism, about the Red Caesar movement and a bunch of these people who Trump was surrounding himself with. And I kind of had a plan for leading up to the election. And so I just didn't get around to doing the proper amount of research on it. So to this day, I have not yet done a 9/11 episode because it's just so big. And, I have a rule. My episodes, they are never more than 59 minutes and 59 seconds, ever.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go over an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So, to try and distill it down to 45, 50 minutes is a challenge, and it's going to take time. Maybe this year.
Mm-hmm. So the one more thing is, like, the next one is, like, the moon landing. I believe that
Hmm.
people has actually landed in the moon. What do you think? Do you believe that people have never landed on the moon? And
No,
what?
of course, we landed on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we landed on the
Yeah,
moon.
that is something which I cannot buy at all. Like, the so what is that major thing that the propagators are the paparazzis are bringing up? Like, this is the thing.
Well, it was funny because it happened in July 20th, 1969, and they did a poll of people shortly, it's like a month afterwards, and already something like 20% of Americans said they found it was such an incredible feat they found it hard to believe. And then whatever. Life went on, and there was Watergate and all this. And then in 1976, a guy wrote a book called "We Never Went to the Moon: America's $30 billion Swindle," which supposedly laid out all these proofs about how you can tell that we didn't go to the moon. And that really, so it's 1976. It's 7 years later that this really starts to kick off. And then, and the thing is, it's great for conspiracy people or people who want to exploit the conspiratorially minded because there are so many niggly little details you can spend all day arguing about them. What about the shadows? How come they're like that? Because that's how it works on the moon, because there's almost no atmosphere. What about the flag? It's flying in the wind. It's not flying in the wind. There's no wind. It just does that. And if you had ever been in a zero G environment or a really low G environment like that, you would know that. Like one guy, when I did my episode about it, he contacted me and said, "Why is the horizon so close?" And I said, "Because the moon is smaller, you idiot. Of
Mm-hmm.
course it's closer. It's a quarter of the size of the Earth. Of course it's it's closer to the viewer because it's smaller. I mean, it just doesn't take that much thinking about it. And then the other thing that made people start going, was at the same time, Stanley Kubrick came out with 2001: A Space Odyssey, and his special effects guy was Douglas Trumbull. And Douglas Trumbull would go on to become an important part of Industrial Light and Magic and basically define those late 70s and 80s special effects that Industrial Light and Magic and Lucasfilm got very famous for making. And so it's his vision, his pioneering thing. And he and Kubrick wanted to make it with the scientific knowledge we had at the time as accurate as they could. So, what a surprise that it turns out that when we see images of the actual moon, it looks a lot like the stuff in that movie, which then leads people to say Stanley Kubrick filmed the moon landing, the fake moon landing, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why they look the same, because they're the same footage, but they're not. If you look at the footage from the movie and you look at the pictures from the actual footage from the Apollo program, they're not exactly the same. There are differences because Trumbull and Kubrick got some of it wrong. And then the question is, why? Why? Why would they do it? Why would they do it? Oh, well, because the space program is a lie, and NASA is just a black ops budget that they claim is for a space program, but there is no space program, which then feeds into flat Earth and feeds into a bunch of other things. For me, the number one proof that, or let's say assumption that absolutely these ideas that it was faked are not true, is that it is known that in the late 60s, there were quite a number of Soviet spies who had infiltrated various levels of the American government. And since we were in a space
Mm-hmm.
race, if
Mm-hmm.
the Americans had been unable to land on the moon and had instead faked it, almost certainly one of those spies would have found out about it. Why would the Soviets sit on that information when it's the greatest propaganda victory of the age? Instead, what happened is America landed on the moon and the Soviets abandoned their moon program
Mm-hmm.
because they were only doing it for propaganda purposes. They didn't care about actually getting to the moon. They just wanted to be first. They were the first in space. They were the first to put up a person. They were the first to put up an animal. They were the first to orbit the Earth. They were the first to put up a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted, this was just propaganda for them. So this is a great embarrassment for the Americans if they couldn't actually get it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
would have crowed about it, but they
Mm-hmm.
didn't because we did. Of course we did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just and then you get into and then you get into people who say, well, the moon's not really the moon. It's a space station. It's a hologram,
Mm-hmm.
and all that. And that's why I had to do two episodes. I did one about the moon, and
Mm-hmm.
then I did another one about the moon landing.
What is
And
the numbers of the episodes?
the moon one is 19.
Mm-hmm.
The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and episode 37, Magnificent Desolation. The moon landing was a hoax, is about the moon landing hoax itself. And I have to say, that is one of the ones that I get the most pushback from conspiracy people. Because moon landing deniers, there are a lot of them, and they apparently have a lot of free time on their hands. And
Mm-hmm.
so they do not mind sending me emails telling me why I'm a government shill. So as I wrote one guy back, I said, well, I wish I was a government shill because then I would have much more money than I do,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have a bigger house.
So, what is this protocols of the elders of the Sion? What is this? What is the proper
Zion.
Zion? Okay.
Yeah. So the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a document
Mhm.
Supposedly, it is
Mhm.
a document of a secret meeting that took place between high ranking Jews, whatever that means, who met here in Prague, in the
Mhm.
Czech Republic, where I live, in the Jewish cemetery here. And they had a little meeting where they all sat around and talked about how they were going to how they had been trying to take over the world, and then their plans to take over the world.
Mhm.
And this got written up. It first showed up in 1905 in Russia, and then it started to spread. Now, Russia, rabidly anti-Semitic country, so they already, the people who hated the Jews were like, "See, I told you, proof.
Mhm.
Why the Jews haven't bothered to take over yet after all these thousands of years is a mystery. They have all this evil intent and all this influence, and yet for some reason they still haven't taken over the world. But anyway, let's have a pogrom and kill a bunch of Jews and drive them out of the country. Hitler believed it.
Mhm.
A whole bunch of people believed it. It actually, once Hitler took over, it was taught in schools in Nazi Germany as fact. Even
Mhm.
though it showed up in 1905, but I don't remember when it was because I haven't done an episode on it yet. But not long after, 10 years maybe after it first started showing up and making the rounds, it was debunked as a forgery. And they even know who debunked it, who wrote
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
and why they wrote it. They based it on something earlier, and they wrote it because the person who wrote it really, 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 really hated Jews. And so
Mhm.
they just made this thing up. And yet there are people today, white supremacists and anti Semites today, who will point to it and go, see, that's the proof. Well, it's not proof because it's a fake document, and we know that.
Mhm.
It's been proven. So, sorry. All you can do to say in an argument against that is, yeah, but your proof is what's fake. Ugh. Oh, well,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Great argument. Well done.
Mhm. Subliminal advice. What is it actually?
Subliminal advertising. Yes, this is an idea a lot of people have. Back in the 50s, there was an idea that, so for example, a movie, a film
Mhm.
strip,
Mhm.
is 24 frames in 1 second.
Mhm.
That's how, because all a film is pictures. It's just photographs. But
Mhm.
if you take 24 photographs and you s- basically show them to a human being in serial format in 1 second, 24 in 1 second, the eye and the brain that creates the visual system and our visual perceptions perceives it as as motion.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, in every second of film footage, there are 24 pictures.
Mhm. Mhm.
In video, I think it's a little bit less, but now, of course, we're in high definition video, so it's a little bit more. The frame rate's a little higher. But the idea was, wow, so that means one picture is 1/24th of a second, which they did studies and they showed that that's not perceptible to a human being. Or is it? Here's the idea. What if in that sequence of 24 pictures, I put in just one frame that says buy popcorn? Will a person subconsciously see it? They won't consciously see it. They won't go, hey, what was that? Did that say buy popcorn? No, because it was only up for 1/24th of a second. But maybe subconsciously, we will influence the person to buy popcorn. And so they did. They experimented with it. Some cinemas would throw in Coca-Cola or buy popcorn or something like this to try and make more money. And yet it didn't work because it doesn't work.
Mhm.
We now know that study after study after study after study has shown that it doesn't work. You can affect people's perceptions by doing things in their peripheral vision, but you can't really get them to act in a different way through things like this. And so the idea of subliminal advertising died until the 1980s in America when the Satanic Panic kicked off and everybody started freaking out that America was being taken over by Satanists and heavy metal music. They're putting in subliminal messages. They're doing backmasking, which was a technique the Beatles pioneered, where you take something, you record it backwards, and you insert that as a series of sort of nonsensical sounds in your recording. And, oh, a boy killed himself. And if you listen to the song of one of his favorite bands, it says, kill yourself backwards. And they're putting in all the Satan is Lord. And so, of course, because people were saying this, some of those heavy metal groups started to do it because they knew that they would sell more records. Does it work? No, it doesn't. I've listened to those songs that say kill yourself, and I'm still here. So maybe
Like
I'm just
when
strong.
we are talking about the satanic stuff, is like, they maybe they could put the prayers also along with the songs, mostly, maybe, I mean, praising
Yeah,
the
exactly. But
Satan.
here's the thing. If it
Mhm.
worked,
Mhm.
then wouldn't the Christians be using it? Since they're
Mhm.
especially the ones who are so big on converting every single person they encounter to their particular brand of Protestantism, of which there are over 500 variations. So, wouldn't you think if we knew it worked, wouldn't we be using it? Wouldn't we be using it all the time? If
Mhm.
I were a Christian evangelical preacher with my own TV show trying to get money, I would be putting in subliminal things of $1,000. Give me $1,000. Give me $1,000 right now, all
Mhm.
the time during my broadcast. And if it worked, I would have way more money.
Mhm.
But they don't do this because it doesn't work.
Mhm. 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 Uh, so the
And just to
co
let you know, I did an episode. I haven't done one on subliminal advertising yet, but I did do an episode about the Satanic Panic, number 66, because I thought that was funny.
about the satanic panic, like, yeah.
Yeah. Which
Mm-hmm.
was crazy. I mean, it went on for 12 years. It was really nuts.
Almost 12 years it was, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe more. And there's still people today who, I mean, they would burn. I just love them. They would burn. There was a case where I can't remember where it was, Indiana. A preacher got together with his flock and they,
What do you think about the Roswell, the thing which has been happened in the Roswell? Like, they found one alien spaceship. Like, when we are talking about the alien and things like that, what is your take on that? Like,
so 1947 was really the year of the flying saucer for the Americans. It started with a pilot excuse me, in Washington State who said he saw a bunch of flying discs near Mount Rainier. And then a little bit later in 47, there was something fell from the sky outside of Roswell, New Mexico. And the initial newspaper report was, oh, this is some kind of maybe one of these flying saucers we've been hearing about. And then the government showed up and said, yeah, no, it's not. And then other people said, yes, but look at this strange material. Oh my gosh. And so people debated it for a little while. The government stepped in and said, no. And the interesting thing is, the government was like, they really did kind of strong arm people who were witnesses or who were saying certain things. Like they went in and they told people, seriously, you need to stop talking about this. Just drop it. It was a weather balloon. That is the end of the conversation. Shut up. And so, of course, people, what would you think? You would think, so we were right. It is a UFO. And so, therefore, it must be some kind of you're covering it up for some reason, probably because you got technology or whatever. And then it kind of just died. This is the funny thing. A lot of these things that we think are they've been around ever since the very beginning. They didn't really become things until fairly recently. It really isn't till 1980 when a book called The Roswell Incident comes out. And this is written by two people, Charles Berlitz and Bill Moore. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the Berlitz Language School. It's all over the world. They
mm-hmm.
have a very particular, they use something called the direct method for teaching. They have a very particular way that they teach. And he is the founder of that school. But in the late 60s, he kind of went down the weird route and he wrote a book about the Bermuda Triangle, which very few people had even considered a real thing. And he started pushing, no, it's real, it's real. Then he started writing stuff about Atlantis. Then he wrote stuff about this and that. And he's one of the fathers of this 1970s boom in weirdness, conspiracy theories, again, mainly held by left wing people at the time. Bigfoot, Bermuda Triangle, Atlantis, Noah's Ark was found.
But there are peoples are showing all sort of the metals which has been found on this particular thing. This could be from some technologies out of out of the planet Earth, and this could be something that could may not be possible with a human being. This should be that sort of thing. What do you think about all these kind of evidences which they are pushing on the internet, and we
Well,
could.
the evidence is that this is not weather balloon material, and so
Mhm.
therefore it must be alien. Here's the truth of it, though. So the reason I mention this is nobody really thought about it. The government told people, shut up. They did, and nobody talked about it until this book comes out in 1980. Berlitz is one of the authors. Bill Moore, who is a massive scammer in the UFO world, he's one of the creators of the Majestic 12 conspiracy theory and a whole bunch of these other things. He's just another one of these early UFO scammers. And then people started talking about it and going back and looking at the quote unquote evidence that's around and so on and so forth, finding that sometimes it's hard to find official documents and pictures and things because the government really was trying to hush something up. They had, I can't remember the name of it now. I was trying to look it up real quick, but they had a program in which they would send not weather balloons, but a different kind of balloon very high into the atmosphere, high altitude balloons that were listening devices. Not so you can pick up a conversation, but they were listening for certain kinds of low frequency rumbles or booms that would tell them if the Soviets were conducting underground nuclear weapons tests. And so that was a state secret. That was a big secret. The Soviets can't know that we have these balloons way up there listening for if they're conducting nuclear tests because we ask them and they say they're not, but we don't believe them. So that was the secret program that the government was covering up. And so that's why people were strong armed into silence and so on. But then in 1980, Bill Moore and Charles Berlitz, who don't know about this secret program because it hadn't come out yet, they hadn't declassified it, they start to speculate. It was aliens. Well, why did they cover it up? Because they recovered technology and they recovered bodies or maybe living aliens. And from there grows a whole sweet industry, really, of fantastical stories, great stories, entertaining stories. None of them true about UFOs, secret government deals with aliens. Eisenhower back in 1957 made a deal with the aliens, let them abduct human beings in exchange for technology and all this stuff. And it all stems from these two guys, really. So that's what happened with Roswell.
So, but the thing is like that the balloons, weather balloons, is being cleared up very fastly from the place. What do you think about that? Like, is it so normal to clear something from the incident
Because it
place?
wasn't a weather balloon. It was one of these listening device balloons. It was a different kind of a balloon, and they didn't want anyone to know that they had this up there because it was a secret.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's not weather balloon material because it's not a weather balloon. It's this different, sturdier kind of balloon. And
Mm-hmm.
so, no, it turns out that the residents of Roswell, New Mexico, and the sheriff had never seen this material before because they're not cleared for classified military experiments. So, of course, they'd never seen this material before. But the reason they made that initial jump to, oh, it's UFOs, is only because just a couple of months earlier, the UFO craze started, and flying saucers and all the rest. And so they just they just took that story that was flying around in the zeitgeist and in the newspapers at the time, ran with it, and the government kind of didn't mind that people were talking about that. Go ahead, talk about flying saucers, because that way you're not really trying to find out what this stuff is, which is our secret listening device so that we can spy on the Soviets' nuclear program. So that's why.
Is there any episode which you have did about this particular incident?
I do mention Roswell briefly in there's a uh, as we were leading up towards what would become the first of now three congressional hearings in the United States on UFOs, or UAPs as they're known now, unidentified aerial phenomena. Um, I did a whole bunch of stuff about UFOs, and the first one of those was about early ufology. And that's called Signs, Grudges, and Blue Books, because those were the early programs looking into this stuff. And that's episode 23. Roswell's briefly mentioned, but it's basically all about those early days of UFOs and how that really started to become such a thing. But again, UFOs have been a thing around. Roswell really wasn't talked about. Nobody, really, even UFO people, never really thought about it because it was obscure and nobody had really heard about it until this 1980 book. And then suddenly everybody was like, I've known about it for years. No, you haven't. You didn't even know about it till this book came out. So, stop.
So what do you think about the UFOs in general? Is there any conspiracy
Mm.
theories which has been came true about the UFOs and the aliens basically? What is your call on that? Like,
Well, it's interesting. People used to ask me, do you believe? You seem to disbelieve all these conspiracy theories. Are there any that you think might have something to them? And I used to say there are two. There are two conspiracy theories that I give some serious thought to. One is UFOs, and two is that we all live in a simulation. Those are the two that make me go, yeah, maybe. The simulation one, I did a whole episode about it. The simulation one is a black box problem because if it's true, we will not be able to get out of the simulation enough to be able to tell if we are or we aren't. And so, therefore, like a religious belief, it's just something you just go with or don't go with. Who cares? If you're trying to find the truth, you'll never find the truth while you're alive because you can't. When it comes to the UFOs, I used to think while there are a lot of scammers, a lot of liars, a lot of scammers, quite a few lunatics in the UFO space, I always kind of thought there's something to it. I don't know what it is. I don't believe that people are being taken up and having things put into their anal cavities by aliens, because honestly, how many times would you need to do that before you go, yeah, it's exactly the same as the last 35 times we did it. The guy didn't like it. But, so like, how often do we do it? But surely there's something because we do have so many stories and there's, it's not great evidence, but there's some evidence. And it's not helped by the people who throw up a dinner plate or a hubcap from a car in the air, take a picture of it and go, look, a UFO. Those people aren't helping because there really is something there. And the interesting thing, of course, it's become such a big thing now because the Americans have finally said something. For years, the French have said, absolutely 100%. We see stuff in our airspace and we don't know what the hell it is. And it moves and behaves like it's a physical object, not an illusion of some sort, optical illusion, like there's a physical thing there. It reflects light. There are radar signals, which means radio waves are hitting something physical and bouncing back to our receivers. So there's something there, and they move in a way that is impossible to our knowledge, according to not just our current level of technology, but our knowledge of the laws of physics and aerodynamics. The Belgians said the same thing. The Brazilians have been saying it for decades. The Japanese have said it. But, especially for Americans who kind of have a hard time believing any other country but America exists, it took the Americans to finally say, okay, they did it. I did all these episodes in the lead up to the big congressional hearing. They had the congressional hearing, and the people in the military, we discovered two interesting things. One, there is absolutely something in our airspace and we don't know what it is. Like for sure, UFOs are absolutely real. What they are, that's the problem. Nobody knows. They don't know. Are they aliens? Maybe. Are they transdimensional beings? Maybe, if that's even a real thing. Are they another country's technology? We really don't think so because we have pretty darn good technology and we're nowhere close to being able to do some of the things that these things can do. Are they physical? Sometimes they do seem to be. And that's the problem. So we learned that there is something. We learned that they do not know what it is. And we learned that there has been a concerted effort for decades to not really try and find out. Why?
Mhm.
You would think that we would be very curious about this. A couple of reasons. One, because the different branches of military and military intelligence do not like to share information with each other. The Navy has their information, the Air Force has their information. They don't like to share. They don't
Mhm.
want to share. They don't want to start that process. Number one. Number two, it turns out that in the US government, there are some pretty hardcore evangelical Christians. And these evangelical Christians absolutely believe in the literal truth of the Bible. And they absolutely believe
Mhm.
that Satan is a real being who
Mhm.
lives in the middle of the earth or on Saturn or who the hell knows where they think he lives.
So
But
because
they
of
think he's
because of
real
because of that, they tend to cover up a lot of stuffs which is related to the UFOs and aliens. That's what you're trying to say.
because they think they know the answer. One guy,
Mhm.
there's this guy
Mhm.
who was looking into this stuff. Who, somebody talked to him in the corridors of the Pentagon where they worked, and he said, "Why do you keep poking around in this? We both know what they are." And this guy said, "Well, no, that's the whole point. That's why I'm trying to get more information because we don't know what they are." And the guy goes, "But we do. Demons." So now we have this. So it turns out that, yes, when Project Blue Book, which was a decades long look into UFO reports, started, it was legit. And then the new guy who came in to take over was tasked very specifically with Mm-mm-mm-mm. All of these things have to be explained. You can't have any unexplained things on your books. And then the next guy that came in was a true believer in the demon hypothesis. And so he had a vested interest in saying, no, no, we can't talk about this. We just need to let it go because we're going to start Armageddon. We're going to start the final war between good and evil and destroy the earth, which we don't want to do. And so therefore, we're not going to talk about this and we're not going to look into it. And anybody that says they saw a UFO needs to shut the hell up. And so that's what happened until now. They're starting to destigmatize the very topic, and people are starting to come out and say yes, like credible people, not Joe Blow on the ground, but like pilots, military pilots, and people who are trained to be observers are saying yes, I saw something. The problem is we don't know what they are.
See the
They're real. We just don't know what they are.
So what do I do agree to these 2 points. One is like, the simulation. Probably we could have we are living in a simulation. Why? Because
Possible.
in religious text also. I mean the ancient text which we are in India. Most of the peoples are believing. We say this is Maya. This is illusion.
Yeah.
There is something
It
which
does
is
sound very similar, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It sounds very similar. Also, the UFOs or the alien creatures, when we are talking about this stuff, like there is a particular possibility that let's assume we are only having five senses where we are able to hear, we are able to listen, we are able to see, and stuffs like that. Let's assume we are having some two more senses, and our perception about the world will be entirely different. So
True.
the thing is like the when we are doing the sort of configuration and sort of experiment with the gods and things like that, the deities. So some people are feeling this is actually coming out. Maybe this could be the other form of the life which is coexisting with the life of us also. This is one of the possibility which I strongly believe.
This is one of the, but again, I would caution
Mm,
use that word belief
mm,
because you don't have any evidence for this.
Mm-hmm.
None. All we know is that there are things flying around in the sky. They
Mm-hmm.
especially like coming really close to military aircraft. They really like hanging around nuclear power plants and nuclear missile silos. And that's all we know. We don't know if they're crafts. They act like they are, but we don't know that they are because sometimes they don't act like they are. So we don't know if they're vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if there are living creatures in those vehicles. We don't know what those living creatures are. All the different theories out there. They're aliens from another planet. They're aliens from our own solar system. They're us in the future who have come back. Again, time travel, is it real?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, no. They live inside the Earth. Maybe the hollow Earth theory, though I
Mm-hmm.
think we know that that's probably not true. And then there's a whole suite of these transdimensional beings or beings that coexist with us in the universe, but we can't perceive. But for some reason, they can. The problem, and it's interesting because I've been doing some research on this because I'm very soon going to do another follow up. Now that we've had 3 congressional hearings, I'm going to do a follow up on here's where we are with the UAP thing. Here's what's happening. The problem is that many of these people who were pushing for what they call disclosure, please, can we be honest about this? Can we admit that something's there? And can we share information so that we can maybe start figuring out what the heck it is and what the heck is going on? A lot of them are not getting what they want. And so many of them are starting to go down these different paths. It's almost because there's an economic ecosystem in the conspiracy sphere. You need to have a conspiracy theory that you're pushing or you don't make any money. No one's going to pay for a book that says, I don't know, you know,
And
no one's
very
going to do
true.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. Like, maybe.
UFOs, who the hell knows? Buy my book. No one's going to buy that book. No one's going to listen to that podcast. No one's going to watch that movie, you know. So you got to come up with a thing, and more of these people are starting to go down this. There was a guy named John Keel who became famous researching the Mothman, and he had a whole theory based on literally nothing. That there are beings that are, because first he said, okay, it looks like UFO phenomena, but not just UFOs, um, electromagnetic interference, the Men in Black, which we now know is completely made up, and a few other things. They all seem to, it's almost like they're messing with us, but they're messing with us in a very lame way. Like they don't understand our systems, our society, the way that we even perceive things in the physical world. Like they're really bad simulacra of some kind, and it doesn't make sense. But he got the sense very much that they were toying with people like him who were looking into them. So he started to come up with this idea of what he called not extraterrestrials but ultra terrestrials, which are in fact beings, fully formed beings, probably with their own society and their own, civilization that live here, kind of, sort of, next to us, and we just don't perceive them. And that when they try and interface with us, they have to kind of bring it down, and they're
Yeah,
not very good at it.
this is something which I also believe, because some certain rituals which we perform in the, I mean, so-called the spirituality, these kind of things we really feel the presence of the extra being. It's not just the experience of a single person; it is the experience of a collective people. Like, it's not just, maybe some people are believing it's as God, some people are believing it as some sort of deities, and but if some people are looking into that with a radical mindset, in order to get the the secrets to be unveiled in whatever is existing. This is something which I have seen, and I have I mean, some ancient text and scrolls, and there are methods to experience these kind of deities or the another dimension being, maybe in modern broken language, maybe we could say, because when they are writing all this stuff, they may not be knowing what this is exactly, because they don't have all these kind of modern technologies and things like that. See, this is something which I experience. I mean, I believe basically. So,
Mhm.
have you ever thought of doing a podcast on the conspiracies which I believe?
Have I thought of doing an episode of Conspiracy Clearinghouse about conspiracies that you specifically believe? No, because I don't know what those are.
Mhm.
Which ones? Which ones do you believe?
I mean, no, I mean about you. I'm talking about you. Did
Oh,
have you ever?
me.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
oh, I understand. I was like, no, I don't know. You have to tell me which ones you believe, and I'll tell you yes or no. The ones I believe, I've already done the simulation
Mm-hmm,
proposal, and I've done many of them on UFOs, and I'm going to do another one on that
mm-hmm,
soonish, and
mm-hmm,
especially looking at the transdimensional being angle of things. Um, though I don't buy it because again, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a religious person, and so uh, I understand, for example, like you say, hey, I've experienced it. It does feel like there's something else. I can't see it, but there is something else physically present here, and other people around me do. Having said that, there are studies and experiments that have been done that show it's actually not that hard to induce that um, perception or that intuition in people, especially in groups of people who are there for a focused particular reason, especially if they already have a pre-existing belief in these things. It's actually not hard to do at all. But even maybe, here's the thing when it comes to the transdimensional being thing, maybe my
mm-hmm,
problem is that so many of these UFO experts out there who are talking about this and who have started out of nowhere. It was
mm-hmm,
aliens, 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 aliens.
mm-hmm,
And now they have shifted very quickly when they're not getting enough play, enough attention to transdimensional beings who are evil. They're
mm-hmm,
evil. They eat. One of them is hysterical. They eat human souls while we dream. Oh,
mm-hmm,
just stop. You, what are you talking about?
mm-hmm,
You don't have any evidence. We don't even know that there are other dimensions. We don't know that there are things outside of our. Because here's the thing: you and I can't perceive the infrared. We
mm-hmm,
have tons of machines that can, and they're not picking up on this stuff.
mm-hmm,
They're not picking up on any of this stuff. So then we get into, well, okay, but there's like a universe right next to our. Well, now been trying to do for decades. So again, if we want to take these things as articles of faith,
mm-hmm,
I believe that there are alternate variations of our universe next to us. And I believe, so that's one amazing thing that if it were proven would change everything and completely transform human consciousness and society. That's one thing.
mm-hmm,
Next, that those are inhabited by other beings or versions of ourselves. That's number two amazing thing to learn about. Even more changes. Number three, it's possible to move between one and another. That's three amazing things. And at this
mm-hmm,
point, you've already lost me
mm-hmm,
because those are three amazing things, none of which we have any evidence for except maybe. And
mm-hmm,
then when we go through that, we go through all these different things, and we finally come to they are evil and they are eating our souls. Soul? Who proved the existence of the soul? When did that
mm-hmm,
happen? How did I not catch that news headline? I didn't know that we'd proven the existence of the soul. So that's another problem. Souls, they're eating our souls, which may or may not exist, and they're eating them, whatever that means, when we dream as they pass into our universe through our minds. Like, what are you what are you talking about? Like suddenly,
mm-hmm,
when you hear this kind of stuff, some of the stories religions come up with sound positively reasonable
mm-hmm,
compared to some of the mythologies that the UFO people are pushing out there. Because the religions at least do have a series of practices that
mm-hmm,
allow people to commune with each other, certainly,
mm-hmm,
commune with certain thought ideas and gestalts, certainly, with something else, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
I know it feels like it, so maybe
Mm-hmm.
not, but maybe. And if not, how is it that, you and all these other people all have the exact same experience? Does
Mm-hmm.
that mean that that experience has an external reality, which would be amazing to learn? Or does it mean that that's purely subjective and internal, but one strong personality somehow, non physically or without physical touch, communicated that to all the other people in the group? And that would be amazing to learn as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Either one of those would be absolutely amazing. And I would welcome any research into both of those possibilities or any other possibilities. But it gets confused when we get into this war of good and evil and interdimensional dream, soul eating dreamer monsters that fly around in spaceships. This doesn't help anything.
Mm-hmm.
These questions, the questions I think that you're interested in looking at, are interesting questions and they're worthwhile questions. But when they get confused with all of this nonsense, with
Mm-hmm.
these ridiculous horror story narratives, nobody benefits except
Mm-hmm.
for the people who are pushing those narratives, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
then my next question is, how much do they benefit? How much does Bill Moore make pushing the Majestic 12 narrative? He
Mm-hmm.
took the time to make fake documents that looked like they were multiple generation copies with
Mm-hmm.
using ditto machines at the time. So he took, I mean, hours and hours and hours to write them, to put a coffee, ring on them, to make them look authentic. Hours of his time. So he could slip them through the mail slot at his friend's house. And then what? Write a book which sold
Mm-hmm.
what?
So what
2,000 copies?
can I pursue there? Like, what is your what do you think about the chemtrails basically, which we can see on the sky when the like I mean what
Yeah.
yeah,
That's the
you
other
got it
group of
what I
people
mean,
who
right?
love to write me hate mail is the chemtrailers. Yeah, they're called contrails. They're a physical phenomenon. They've been around since the 1940s. We have pictures of them from World War II.
Like
There's nothing mysterious.
yeah, it's very common, like so what could be the reason behind this particular conspiracy?
I know exactly what it is. It starts in 1999 with a radio show. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you've ever heard of this, called Coast to Coast AM.
Mm-hmm.
Coast to Coast AM was an AM, as opposed to FM radio show in the United States, run by a guy named Art Bell.
Mm-hmm.
Art Bell was a very, very, very nice man. I actually don't know what his true motivations were, but I used to listen to it, and on his show, who said the most outlandish things. My shadow came alive and tried to strangle me.
Mm-hmm.
Really, my shadow tried to strangle me one day. And he doesn't say, that sounds like nonsense. He just goes, wow, that's really amazing. He believed everybody. If they
Mm-hmm.
came on his show, he believed them. And so, possibly accidentally, he ended up creating or encouraging the creation of this modern conspiracy landscape that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1999, a guy came on there who said, hey, back in 1996, the Air Force had commissioned a study about weather modification. Could we
Mm-hmm.
change the weather? Because we knew back in the 50s we were screwing up the climate.
Have you
And so
mentioned
what
have you studied this in any of your episode where people could go and refer to?
chemtrails.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes. Episode 73, My
Mm-hmm.
Chemtrail Romance. It's all about chemtrails.
Mm-hmm.
And
What
it
you
and it but it starts with Art Bell in a 1999 episode of his radio show, and it took off from there. And at that time, now the internet existed,
mm-hmm.
and so it spread very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there is another theory, like we have spoken about one conspiracy which you also is been believing, that the I mean believing in one conspiracy can lead to another belief in another conspiracy, which you've been already been said. Like the thing is like this world can be illusion, and like if we look into that sense, can't be a reptile is actually ruling us.
It's the craziest idea, and it comes from. There's a very specific source for this. Is what's known as a point zero. The point zero for this is a guy named David Icke. David
Mhm,
Icke was a rather well-regarded British sportscaster. He was on TV all the time. He was someone that people trusted. He was well-spoken. He was, I guess, good-looking for the age. And then something happened to David Icke, and nobody really knows what happened to him. But he went a little weird,
mhm,
and he started calling himself Son of the Godhead
mhm,
because he heard a voice tell him when he was in Peru, supposedly at some stone circle, that he was basically the Messiah, and he was here to save humanity. From what? Well, from evil, shape shifting reptiles.
mhm, mhm,
That's quite a thing. That sounds like a psychotic break to me.
mhm, mhm,
But David Icke went on TV and he said this. And it's a rather famous clip. And in my episode about the reptilian conspiracy, I have a link to that clip
mhm,
where because the British TV is a lot different than, say, American television. They're pretty brutal. and David Icke was terribly, terribly embarrassed.
mhm,
And so he then went, they're making fun of me, as they should have. And so then he started writing these books. And the conspiracy got bigger and crazier and wilder. And then he came upon a very interesting idea. Like I was saying before, how much money are these people making selling 1,000 copies of their book and getting paid what, $100 to show up at a UFO conference? Like I actually don't understand the motivation of people like Bill Moore who just make things up and then spend all of their time and energy spreading them. To what end? You're not getting rich off of it. We know this. But David Icke has gotten rich. David Icke gives 5, 6, 7, 8 hour talks to stadiums full of people. Entry ticket, thousands of dollars. And he just goes up there and says whatever the hell crazy stuff is in his head. And it's gotten more and more complicated over the years. And now everything is tied into it. Pyramids and, history is a lie. Medicine is a lie. The world is a lie. But the core of it all is that there are these reptiles who they don't change their shape. They interfere with human perceptual systems to make them appear to us as human, but to others of their own kind who have different perceptual systems. That clearly, in a room, I as a human see a room full of humans, but the reptile looks around and sees I'm a reptile, that guy's a reptile, that woman's a reptile. Hi, how you doing? How's it going? What do the reptiles want? Well, you see, they're what we might call evil. They eat human suffering. When human beings experience pain and fear, it causes chemical changes in their blood, none of which is true, by the way. If so, the Nazis would have discovered it. And that chemical is like it's like a really, really nice brandy to these guys, and they don't need it to live, but they really like it. And so they are trying to enslave us so that they can drink our blood. Where do they come from? Well, they
mhm,
come from Orion, from a star in the constellation of Orion.
mhm.
Or they come from a transdimensional rift in space-time near a star in Orion. But anyway, somewhere around Orion, probably though maybe someplace
Have
else.
have you have
And
you
they're here.
spoken have you spoken about the reptiles in any of your episode where people could go?
Yes. So the reptilian conspiracy was the original intention of the podcast. And it
Mm-hmm.
took me 82 episodes to get around to it because it was so big
Mm-hmm.
and so complicated and so funny. And
Mm-hmm.
as time went on, it got more and more complicated as I was researching it. And I finally just went, ah, I have to I have to stop here. And so episode 82 is all about the reptilian conspiracy. And it is my number one most listened to episode to
Mm-hmm.
this day. This is the one that people like. And again, you think, okay, big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Except that there are two problems.
Mhm.
with the reptilian conspiracy. Not to mention that there are suckers out there who are willing to pay $2,000 to hear David Icke ramble on for 8 hours straight in a football stadium. But that's their problem. The problem is, number one, that all of this, and David Icke himself has, of course, started going down this route as well. All of this is simply a rebranding of anti Jewish conspiracy theories that have been around for ages, especially the blood libel. And the blood libel is that Jews need the blood of
Mhm.
Christian children, like the blood of Christian children is different than other children's blood. Come
Mhm.
on.
Mhm. Mhm.
They drink isn't. And so, on the one hand, what he's doing is he's really just pushing anti Jewish conspiracy theories.
Mhm. Mhm.
On the other hand, there are people out there who believe it so much. There's a terrible, terrible, terrible story. And this is not the only one, but this is the one that comes to mind of a man. I think he was a bit of a bum. He went from job to job, got divorced, had kids, was a surf instructor in Southern California, got his kids, listened to David Icke, paid attention, subscribed, bought the books, subscribed to the video feeds, all of which are quite expensive. And he's not making a lot of money anyway. He falls for the reptilian conspiracy theory completely. And at this point, the reptilian conspiracy theory starts to bleed into Pizzagate, which then bleeds into QAnon, which is the arch conspiracy theory of our time, and which MAGA has certainly taken on board. So long story short, he gets his kids for his weekend for visitation, but he becomes convinced that his wife, the reason she left him, is because she herself is a reptilian,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
means that his children are part reptilian. And somewhere in there, he gets it in his brain that they look human now, but when they get older, they will become
Mhm.
evil, blood sucking reptilians. So he took his children in his car down to Mexico.
Mhm.
Great for the kids. Hey, a road trip with dad. How fun. He checked into a motel and then he shot them both in the chest with a spear gun.
Mhm. Maybe.
That is the problem with these kinds of conspiracy theories. He
Mhm.
killed his
All
children
children's. Yeah.
because he thought they would become reptiles.
Mhm.
And David Icke, I'm sorry, is a little bit responsible,
Mhm. In order to
and
save the
that
world.
is why I do this podcast because
Mhm.
it just infuriates me.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's so the Illuminati thing, most of the peoples are believing. There are. I also believe there are sort of secret societies which might be working, and the thing along with the Illuminati is the talk about the Denver airport, because that they are using it as the headquarters of the whatever the things
Oh
which they are
yeah,
doing.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
what do you think
yeah,
about that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So
yeah.
I did an episode on the Illuminati. The
Mhm.
Illuminati was started by a little weasel named Adam Weishaupt in 1776 in Bavaria.
Mhm.
He basically he wanted to join the Freemasons. He had an idea in his head about what a secret society should be like, and
Mhm.
there were tons of little secret societies. Very often they were little clubs
Mhm.
of well-connected people, and if you could join that, if you're a I don't know a baker, and you'll never get access to high ranking people in society, especially in the 16, 17, 1800s,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You're never going to get to rub shoulders with those people. But if you're a Freemason, you can. And so
Mhm.
Freemasonry started becoming this kind of gentleman's club, but with a little bit more access for people of lower classes. So people wanted to become Masons. So Adam Weishaupt had it in his head that this is, secret society. And he really liked the pomp and circumstance, the pageantry of it. Oh
Mhm.
boy, we're going to have secret handshakes, secret signals, and costumes, and secret words and codes. It's going to be awesome. And when he got there, he found that it's really just a bunch of men
Mhm.
hanging around making business deals.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
didn't think it was secret enough,
Mhm.
secret society enough.
Mhm.
So he said, I'm going to create my own.
Mhm.
And it was called the Illuminati. Now,
Mhm.
the interesting thing is he started recruiting out of Masonic lodges.
Mhm.
He started recruiting Freemasons, other people who also maybe were like, oh, this isn't nearly as cool as I thought it was going to be. Join us. We're going to actually change things. We have a whole philosophy that he wrote. And if you
Mhm.
don't follow 100% the philosophy, you're out
Mhm.
because he's the boss. Damn it. Finally, he
Mhm.
gets to be the big man. And he starts his little group. And they do, in fact, infiltrate various governments around Europe,
Mhm.
quite high up sometimes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, word gets this goes on for a couple of years. The rulers figure out, hey, this group of people who
Mhm.
seem to think that they're gonna like, are they gonna stage a revolution? I don't want that.
Mhm.
So off you out you go. Sorry, you guys, you can't organize your little groups here anymore. And finally, the ruler of Bavaria just outlaws them
Mhm.
and cracks down with the police. At that point, the Illuminati goes,
Mhm.
and everybody leaves. And a lot of people were already leaving because they didn't like Weishaupt because he was a dick. He was a completely dictatorial, little small minded person, obsessed, spoke in ridiculously overcomplicated sentences, and
Mhm.
just, he was boring. He was bad company, and he was a little dictator. And
Mhm.
really nobody liked him. So
Mhm.
they didn't want to be part of his club. Then, when it turned out the club is now illegal and banned, we really don't want to be a part of it. And that's until the French Revolution. And the
Mhm.
French Revolution happens, and all these rich people around Europe are going, how did this happen? Because poor people are animals. They're not human, they're animals. They're stupid. There's
Mhm.
no way they could have possibly organized this.
Mhm.
They must have had help from a secret group. Hey, what some years ago, wasn't that the group the Illuminati? I bet it was them. I bet they didn't disband. I bet they're in hiding.
Mhm. Mhm.
So now the Illuminati comes back as an idea, not as an organization, but as an idea. And
Mhm.
then that goes away until the 1860s. And in the 1860s, all of Europe is mainly empires
Mhm.
dominating whole ethnic groups. And they have this kind of amazing time where they start to demand, hey, like the Czechs say, hey, we want the Czech language to be spoken in our country, not just German. And we want Czech writers and Czech symphonies and all this. And the Hungarians do this, and the Poles do this, and the Yugoslavs do this, the Serbs do it. Everybody starts doing it. And the powers that rule, remembering what happened with the French Revolution, say,
Mhm.
and they really clamp down hard. But a few a few inroads were made, and there was something of a small cultural renaissance for these sort of dominated cultures. But during this time, again, the thought came into the rich people's heads:
Mhm.
where is this coming from? And
Mhm.
it was these two women, I think they were British, one was British, one was British French, who started going on and on and on about it's the Illuminati. And
Mhm.
so now the Illuminati comes back as a thing to scare rich people with, and which is funny because it's not like they were a working class. This isn't proto communism here. Weishaupt had a very, very stratified view of what society should look like, and he very much thought there should be a small elite ruling class, and everybody else should just shut up and do what they're told. So he's basically like the kings and queens of Europe at the time, anyway. But anyway, it's a scare story. It's like a boogeyman for rich people, and so the rumor that the Illuminati continues to exist perpetuates through the 19th century and into the 20th century. But the
Mhm.
truth is that there is no Illuminati. They existed for like 4 years and then they disappeared, and everything else has been rumor, created by rich people to scare other rich people because they don't understand what happens when sometimes poor people get together and organize. And this is
So,
one of the reasons why communism freaked the crap out of them, because this
mhm.
is what they were saying the Illuminati were doing,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of people were like, well, maybe communism is an Illuminati thing.
Mhm.
But none of it's true. The Illuminati is not
So
real, even
in
though
the
there
in
are
this scenario,
hundreds of websites.
in
Oh,
this
sorry, go
scenario,
ahead.
yeah, in this scenario, where do the Denver airport fit into?
So the Denver airport, because this is one of my favorite ones. There are a couple of episodes I have that were so much fun to research.
Mhm.
Uh, that I just had a great time. This is one of them. This is the 10th episode. And so the idea is Denver International Airport is a big airport. It's in Denver, way up in the Rocky Mountains, and there's a lot of really weird art at the airport. That's the story. We could
Mhm.
stop there. If you wanted to. But the art's just odd, interesting, odd stuff. The most striking thing is outside of the airport, there is a giant blue horse rearing up on its back legs with red eyes. And everybody calls it Blucifer, Blue Lucifer, as a joke. And it's from an old Native American story from way, way back about a horse in the area that led a bunch of his other horses to freedom and all this. And so um, there's this really weird piece of art that looks kind of like a blue, red eyed, satanic horse if you're a person who believes in Satan. And the artist who was making it died while making it because
Mhm.
it fell on him, pinned his leg, and he bled out and died. Or, if you believe the conspiracy theories, he was a blood sacrifice to consecrated to the devil.
Mhm.
That's just one piece of art out of hundreds at the
Mhm.
airport. And
Mhm.
they have some very odd art. There's no discussion about it.
Mhm.
But people have decided that certain symbols they find here and there, and so on, all of these things are proof that the Denver International Airport was built by the New World Order, which is a new name for the Illuminati or the Masons or the communists or the Jews or whoever you particularly hate, who you think is trying to take over the whole world. They built this airport. Now, why would they build an airport? Oh, here's the thing: they built the airport. It's a secret that they built the airport. They built it for a number of evil reasons, and
Mhm.
then we'll talk about those. But they then, like the Beatles, hid all these clues in all this weird art and in stuff around the airport, telling people who are clever enough to figure it out that in fact this airport was built by the evil New World Order. Why
Mhm.
would they do that? Do you know that that's the worst way to keep a secret?
Mhm.
I mean, why would you do it? Why would you,
Mhm.
if you were a secret organization bent on ruling the world and you build this airport for your particular reasons, why would you then hide clues as to who built it all over the airport? It doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
Having said that, the art is odd.
Mhm.
There's a lot of weird art. But what's the airport for? Well, underneath the airport, there are these tunnels.
Mhm.
Ooh, what are the tunnels for? What the tunnels are really for is a very complicated automated baggage handling system that was being experimented with at Denver International Airport. However, it's too complicated and it kept breaking, and so they stopped using it,
Mhm.
which is a waste of money. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
But, now, and this is the great thing about these conspiracy theories, is they're so vague, and conspiracy people, what they constitute is proof. They don't need much. They just
Mhm.
need a little hint, and then they run with it and help co-create the narrative. The tunnels are down there for possibly rounding up a whole bunch of citizens and then killing them
Mhm.
because they want to part of the New World Order grand conspiracy is that we have to reduce the population of the earth. You see, there are too many people
Mhm.
for us to really take over and become the dictators of Earth. So we have to kill like half the people in
Mhm.
order to do that for some reason, I guess. 3 billion people are easier to control than 8 billion, I guess. So we're going to round them up into places like this and we're going to gas them and we're going to kill them. And then that'll
Mhm.
be great. That's the idea. Or
Mhm.
when they unleash the plague,
Mm-hmm.
all over the world that will accomplish this goal of killing so much of humanity so that they can rule them. That's where they will hide, protected. Or
Mm-hmm.
this tunnel system actually goes much further off all throughout the mountains, connecting to underground alien bases
Mm-hmm.
where they have made deals with the reptilians and other aliens. And then when they kill off most of the human population, these few humans will rule over the living humans who are left with the aliens. And so then we'll have a new dictatorship, part human, part alien, maybe reptilian.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on from there. Those are just some of the
Mm-hmm.
conspiracy theories
So
about this airport.
these
And
things
all of this stuff,
yeah, these things you've been discussed in some of your episodes, right? Like, episode number, what is the episode number?
10.
10. Or in that,
10.
almost everything is, if people are listening to that, they can go and listen to that particular episode.
It's all there. It's all there. I had a video, but I got rid of my YouTube channel because I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
But look up some pictures of the art because it's amazing.
It's amazing. Okay. So
It's weird.
the one thing, the one of the conspiracy which I cannot even, I mean, I cannot even digest is like, birds aren't real. I mean, do you, I mean,
Ah, uh, observe.
mm-hmm.
I'm even wearing my birds aren't real t-shirt.
Oh, so you
I
believe?
love birds aren't real. Well, here's the thing. So birds aren't real. Started off in January 2017 in Memphis, Tennessee. A student, I think he was a history student named Peter McIndoe, was there as part of the 2017 Memphis Women's March for reproductive rights and can we finally get paid the same as men and things like this. This is literally the same month that Donald Trump was sworn in as president. So a lot of people were like, "Hey, this is a guy who's he's been accused of rape,
Mhm,
and now he's president. What's going to happen for women's rights in this country?" So he's a young liberal guy. He
mhm,
went, and over there, here's his group, but over there is a group of pro-Trump anti-protesters holding up all kinds of signs with really outlandish conspiracy theories even on them. So as a joke, he walked over, grabbed a blank sign and wrote, "Birds aren't real," and
mhm,
stood with the pro-Trumpers and held it up. Well,
mhm,
there were news people there, and they saw this, and they were like, "Oh, does someone actually think birds aren't real? That's
mhm,
hysterical. How stupid are these Trump people?" And so it took off. It
mhm,
got talked about on the news. Videos of it went viral on YouTube. It was just a joke.
mhm.
And then
It
after
does.
this, it
Sometimes
was
the
just a
jokes,
joke.
yeah, sometimes the jokes can
Yeah.
be a conspiracy as well, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. So he decided to lean into it. So he created Birds Aren't Real. And
Mm-hmm.
he created a whole story
Mm.
about how all birds were
Have you covered this thing in any of your
killed.
episode? Have you spoken about this in any
Yeah,
of your
it's
episode?
part of an episode. Yeah. Episode 9,
Mm-hmm.
just before Denver Airport, is called Now You See It, Now You Don't. Finland doesn't exist. The country of Finland does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's talked about in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's another conspiracy theory that says Australia doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That's also talked about in there.
Mm-hmm.
And birds aren't real is talked about in there
Mm-hmm.
because all of these started off as jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then somewhere along the way, somebody started believing them. Now, I don't believe there's anybody who believes birds aren't real
Mm-hmm.
is real. Everybody who, like me, I love it. I have a t-shirt. I will probably buy more things from Birds Aren't Real because I think it's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
But and the story he's written is wonderful. The website is fantastic. It's so complicated. It looks just like a real conspiracy website
Mm-hmm.
because he's doing something called culture jamming. He's trolling the conspiracy people. He's
Mm-hmm.
making something that looks exactly like a real conspiracy theory,
Mm-hmm.
except that it's so clearly preposterous, except that so is reptilians.
Mm-hmm.
So is you know, Avril Lavigne was replaced by a body double or a clone. So is everything we've talked about in here is
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Mhm.
More ridiculous than birds aren't real? Not really. So he just kind of runs with it,
Mhm.
and it's become this whole thing to the point where when somebody says in a news article or an interview, "Yeah, I love birds aren't real. It's such a great satire of
Mhm.
conspiracy theories," he gets angry and says that person is working for Big Bird. The
Mhm.
because the whole idea is I don't know if you know what it is. All birds were killed by the U.S. government,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the
a war
conspiracies are
against
like,
birds,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
they were replaced with surveillance drones.
Huh, huh, huh.
Yeah.
So
So every time you see a bird in North America, it's a camera.
yeah. So
They're
the
all
thing
they're all
like,
watching you.
yeah, the thing is like, the one more thing is like the internet might be dead. Like, I do believe like almost 10 to 20% of the internet is been actually written by bots, because I'm a software engineer. I can actually simulate a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. For example, like let's say like yeah, in the right now there is AI is been taking over a lot of things. Like, they can also write stuffs, and they can stimulate the stuffs, and maybe bots are even talking about. I mean, I found this. I mean, internet is not dead, but at least 10 to 20% of that is been actually written by bots. This is what I believe.
It's actually estimated now it's around half. Almost
Half.
somewhere around half of all internet traffic is automated, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's content creation or
Mm-hmm.
simply pushing out content. 5G, we talked about 5G previously. 5G is going to help us with the Internet of Things, which
Mm-hmm.
is objects talking to other objects. The internet using the internet. So your
Mm-hmm.
refrigerator is going to talk to, the store, which is going to talk to a delivery service. No human is involved in this chain.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, yes, it's true that about half of web traffic is not human read or human generated.
Mm-hmm.
But the dead internet theory again started off as a joke, much
Mm-hmm.
like birds aren't real.
Mm-hmm.
Or that Finland isn't real, and so on, right? The idea was someone I think it was on the Agora Road forum. There was a sub forum called Macintosh Cafe, and somebody said, basically, somebody went together a bunch of people complaining, "Hey, I keep getting not just one junk email, but
Mm-hmm.
lots of junk emails that are almost worded exactly the same." Or I see a post on Facebook, and then later I see another post that is almost exactly the same post, word for word. What's going on here? So this guy on there puts as a joke, the internet died in 2016 or 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Almost no humans actually use it, and it's all bots and AIs, and they created smart AIs way back before they told us, because that's only
Mm-hmm.
come up in the last two
Mm-hmm.
years.
Mm-hmm.
So they lied. They've been lying about that. That's You've already got a great conspiracy theory because they are lying, and all of this. And then people started to come up with proofs. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, DARPA had this project called LifeLog. There's this thing called total information awareness. Um, Operation Mockingbird and Project Mockingbird, both of which were real things
Mm-hmm.
about how we can how could the CIA, for example, the FBI infiltrate media. There's Google has a thing called the Selfish Ledger, which is training its nascent AIs to create personas for each individual person, and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. But the idea behind the dead internet theory is this already happened a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so you, as a person, think you're interacting with other people, but you're not. You're interacting
Mm-hmm.
with bots and AIs. Now, of course, the great lie here is that everybody who believes the dead internet theory is a human being using the internet,
Mm-hmm.
which disproves the dead internet theory. you know,
I mean, I
that one
don't.
was also a lot of fun to
Yeah,
research.
I mean, I half of. I mean, I believe. I don't believe it's. I don't buy it completely, but I do agree at least 50% of the internet. I mean, as you said, like, it's actually.
It is.
Yeah, yeah. So
But you're not, but that content's not coming to you as an email or coming to you as a social
mhm,
media post.
yeah.
That's all stuff that we never interact with.
Have you spoken about this in any episode where people could find it out?
Yeah, episode 55, The Dead Internet Theory, which
Mm-hmm.
is my third most listened to episode.
Mm-hmm. Do as a conclusion, where people can find you, how do they can
It's
listen?
hosted on Podbean, but it is literally anywhere that podcasts are found. It's on Apple, it's on
Yeah, generally,
Amazon,
do
it's
you have
on.
a you have a website where people can go and listen to
No.
what you? No, okay.
Yeah, they can go to like I said, they can go to Podbean, they can go wherever they listen to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast is there.
The name of the
Whatever they
podcast?
use. If you use Deezer, it's on Deezer. It's called Conspiracy Clearinghouse.
Can you say it
And
is in a very
it
can you say it is very mysterious way? Conspiracy clearing house, like.
Conspiracy Clearinghouse.
Yeah, that's the correct stuff. Like.
Yeah, that's the one. Yes. And the logo is my wife made it. It's a little guy wearing a hat, little
Mhm,
eyeballs, kind of looking like this. Conspiracy Clearinghouse. Every 2 weeks on a Wednesday, every other Wednesday, an episode drops. We are at, as of this recording, we're at episode 125.
mhm, mhm,
And I'm in the process of mapping out the next year. They were 6 months at least, which is,
mhm,
it's a lot of episodes. So, if anybody wants to get in touch with me via social media, they can, or they can send an email to conspiracy.clearinghouse@gmail.com.
mhm,
I don't want to hear why you think chemtrails are real, because they're not. So shut up. I'm just going to block you. But if you have requests for certain topics, go ahead and send them to me, and
mhm. Yeah.
maybe I will do an episode about it, and maybe I won't.
Mhm. Thank you for joining me today. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you. I know it's been a long conversation.
Thank you.